I think that Las Vegas is in our time zone, if I remember correctly. So, David, welcome. And to everyone else, wherever you might be. This is the last of a different kind of a series that I've been doing with the Jewish Collaboration of Orange County, and I want to thank Rabbi Marsha for the opportunity once again to speak with you folks who live at a distance from us out here in Palm Springs. I am in Palm Springs, as most of you know. And while the first 4 meetings were dedicated to more looking at some texts as the background or as a vessel in which I could talk about some of the anecdotally my experiences with interfaith dialogue over the last 20 some years, 25 years, 20 whatever, 30 years even. Today's presentation is a little bit different. There will be text, as you have in the text sheet that we sent out, and if you don't have it, it's in the chat box right now. And but this is something in the recent past in my lifetime. I'm 66 years old. I've been a rabbi since 1993. I've been a Jewish educator since the mid-'80s. I've been, as you know, an Israeli for most of my life, certainly most of my adult life. Soon it's not going to be most of my life anymore. In about 10 years, it'll be half. And I've been very active Jewishly since I was a kid. That's the home that I was brought up in. I was also brought up in a home that had high regard for interfaith dialogue even before I actually knew what that meant. One of my father's closest, my father, blessed memories, closest friend was John Malone, a very observant Catholic lawyer. My father was a lawyer. They went to law school together. They went to Loyola Law School. My father went to a Catholic law school. And he was a guest at our house quite often for the Seder, for Shabbat. So things came up over the years, and I was always raised to have a healthy respect for anybody's observance, whatever that observance might be. But I wasn't really, aside from passing by the Catholic school that was next door to my elementary school, I don't think I was actually in a church for a long time. I don't remember when the first time was, but and then when I became Orthodox, when I was 15, 16, then I would not go into a church out of principle until I kind of came around to a different way of thinking. So when we fast forward to, Susan, so my father was, I think he was older than you, Susan. My father would be today 95. Yeah.
Yes, and I went in my mid-30s and out here in LA.
He went in LA, and the picture of his law school class is hanging in this. We have this. My mother in her house has this little bar area, and it's there, and it's all men.
There was about 50% women by 1976.
Okay. Well, many people in the interfaith world have a fondness for, for the Jesuits. The Jesuits in general who established Loyola and that way of education which is relatively liberal, progressive, but I digress. We come back to today's topic, which is the last 8 years here, last 8.5 years already, I should say. And that's what I want to share with you. So before we go to the text, I want to give you 2 examples of programs that I've done here. I'll already say that I wish I had more interaction with the Muslim community in the Coachella Valley, and now I have some in Redlands. There was a time when I went on a regular basis to the Friday Juma prayer at the mosque in Coachella. It started with the fact that they were firebombed in my first year here, and so a number of us showed up there, like that day, the next day, to show our solidarity, and there were. And that's where I saw some of the other who were going to be my future partners. I guess I knew about it from one person, from one of the clergy I was already in touch with, and then I asked, could I come to pray? And I used to sit in the back when I would come, because you're not supposed to sit in the prayer line or kneel in the prayer line with Muslims if you're not Muslim yourself. And the more I came there, the more the older guys in the back insisted that I be with them in the prayer line. And when I would say, but I'm not a Muslim, he says, no, we talk to the imam, it's all right. So that's a wonderful expression of liberal a liberal form, at least from a social point of view. I can't tell you everything that was in the sermon because it was half in Arabic, half in English. Not in my world of faith study. In the same way that a Baptist church, the Black Baptist church, is here in town also. The sermons are not in my world of giving a sermon. They're very different topics. They talk a lot about Satan, and Satan's going to be one of our topic today. But back to the mosque. I thought it was important to go, and I had wanted to go after the war broke out. I thought that was important, and I no longer have a personal connection there. He went back to Pakistan, and in Redlands, I had some new connections, and it just wasn't the right time. And I understand. And that was in the first 2 weeks of the war. After things got worse, now I wouldn't even ask. It's way too sensitive, hypersensitive. And some of you may know that there was a panel that Rabbi Eli Spitz was supposed to be on, an interfaith panel that was supposed to happen around now, that was canceled in Orange County as well for the same reason. And we just hope that we get back to a time when we're sitting and talking together. I mentioned at some point in my presentations that for me, interfaith interaction, I'm going to go beyond the word dialogue. Interfaith interaction has the three pillars that I think all of Judaism and all of human life have and should have. Those three pillars are Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim. So one of them is studying together. And I've given you examples, I hope, of when I've studied together with other faith traditions. Yes, by nature, it's mostly Christian denominations, but still sometimes with Muslims and even sometimes with Buddhists and Hindus. And I left out, of course, many experiences and stories. But I think Torah is important. Avodah, we'll set that aside. That's prayer, that's worship. Set that aside. Gemilut Chasadim, that's often done. Fixing the world, Tikkun Olam, getting together churches, synagogues, mosques to feed the hungry, to the homeless, in response to a flood, to an earthquake, that happens. And that's really important. That's really good. But for me, I want to have all three things, because I think those three things nourish us in the same way that in Or Hamidbar, we have to have those three things going at all time, in my view and my ideology, because that's what keeps us vibrant. Having a constant eye on those three areas of communal life and personal life, of study, ongoing study, spiritual practice, and fixing the world. And so the study part has been important. The fixing the world is important, but I also want to pray with others. And so once I got to Palm Springs, now I'm leaving the issue of Islam and more to the church world, which was more accessible. I began going, actually for many years, it was 2 or 3 Sundays a month I was in church. Not every Sunday, but 2 or 3, in order to get to know the churches, get to show that my presence. So my goals in going to church and mosque for that as well, although it's a very different culture, is number one, to show my solidarity, my presence. I am a rabbi who is open to being in close contact with other faith communities. So the presence, me being there. Now, I have a lot of colleagues in the conservative movement, and even some of the more liberal Orthodox, who will go to a church during a service, but won't pray. That's where they draw the line. I'm there as a spectator. I'm there, they will say, they're there as a spectator. They're there to honor the tradition, to be respectful, but that's not their prayer. And perhaps I would have been like that in the very beginning of my career in the 90s, but already for me, certainly after Taizé, it was beyond just sitting there. It was, I want to be a participant. Yes, I have red lines that I think I talked about. I don't go up for communion. And in the beginning, I didn't say the Jesus prayers, but now I do, because I see that in a different light. Instead of going in the beginning, I wouldn't go up for communion at all. And I think I told the story of where we were at the ordination of a young friend, and she had prepared a special blessing for us, not to give us communion. She was ordained, and the people, her guests, were waiting in line. But in Sweden, you go like this when you're in the communion line, and then they know not to give you the sacrament, and they give you a blessing instead. In this country, I see people do this. This seems a little bit aggressive. So I do have my red line, so to speak, my limitations. And I'm talking about in a church that welcomes me to take communion. Many churches do. Some churches would not. A Roman Catholic church, that would be inappropriate to even get in line. Maybe even to get a blessing. I don't know. But in the Anglican tradition, that is the Episcopal tradition, and all the other when it does happen, doesn't happen every week necessarily in some of the other denominations. I now get in line to get a blessing from the priest or the minister. So let's take a step back for a second from what I'm telling you. And I want to share with you, I'm really proud. Now I'm bragging. This is the bragging part of it. And I hope these 4 weeks have not been, these last 5 weeks have not been seen as bragging. There probably was some bragging involved, but it's more, I want people to know what I'm doing, and I'm not very good at getting the word out. In general, this is kind of a well-preserved secret, but Madalena, could you put up our webpage that we have on the Ora Midbar webpage? And I encourage you to go, because if you want to see Madalena's wonderful work, before Madalena was with Ora Midbar, she's been before she was with the Jewish Collaborative of the Orange County. So this is Madalena's lovely, lovely work. All the posters, the graphics, the way it's set up. So hold on just a second. So at some point we needed a name for a grant we were applying to, and I came up with this idea with faith in diversity. The idea is that we have faith in diversity, and there is faith in the diverse different areas. In other words, and that was kind of I'm kind of good at taglines and things like that. Not that they go anywhere, but I'm also good, by the way, guessing the lines in a TV series, what's happening, what the next line is going to be. It drives Sasha crazy, but I'm really good at it because I watched a lot of TV. But I sometimes say maybe I should be in writing. Well, actually, that's not been a very good profession to have in the last year or two in Hollywood. Anyway, so that's what this got the name. And we may go back to that name for different reasons, but let's kind of scroll up. This is from the latest to the older. So you scroll a little bit. This was just the Interfaith Pride Kabbalat Shabbat. If you're on Facebook with us, go. I hope we'll have some more pictures, and there's a video as well. I'm so proud of this. We've been doing this, the Pride Kabbalat Shabbat in Pride in Palm Springs, because of the heat, is in November, the first weekend in November every year. And when I got to Palm Springs, I had coffee with Reverend Kevin A. Johnson. We know him affectionately as Rev Kev. He was really kind of my first guy, because the woman who's working in the office of the synagogue, she had known him well, and she called him, said they'd get together. And in the first meeting, he said, "Listen," he was still calling me Rabbi. He says, "Listen, I hope you're not offended, but I Googled you before we met." I said, "We all do that. Of course we do that. That's fine." He says, "And I saw that in Stockholm you did Interfaith Pride Kabbalat Shabbat with the bishop of the Church of Sweden and the head of the other Protestant." He says, "Could we do that here?" And I said, "Of course we can." I just didn't know where to start. He says, so we started with him, and we started at Temple Isaiah, where I was, and already the first year. So we've been doing this for 8 years or 9, or maybe even 9 years already, from the very beginning. And that's on the left. This year we were joined by, there were 12 of us who were prayer leaders, mostly clergy, Christians of different denominations, a Buddhist priest who we're in touch with now, who lives in the high desert, including a Roman Catholic priest who comes every year when he can. Often it conflicts with All Saints observance for him, but it's amazing. I think maybe only in Palm Springs, maybe also in San Francisco, you find a Roman Catholic church and their priest who are welcoming with LGBTQ. And there's a whole group of his folks that come with their T-shirts on. The Roman Saint Teresa's LGBTQ group, which is amazing when you think it's the Roman Catholic Church. I do not invite the Muslims to this. To me, that would be insulting. I see that as insulting. Don't put something that's putting a stumbling block, asking somebody to do something that they really can't do. And I wouldn't have asked the Roman Catholic priest, but he found out about it from one of his people in the second or third year. And he says, "Listen, could I come? Can I be there?" I said, "Yeah. Would you participate?" He says, "Sure." I said, "Like, can we put your logo?" And if you look in the bottom right-hand corner next to the right, the second one from the right, at the bottom, that's the Church of, no, that's St. Paul's. Where's St. Teresa is above, next to Ora Midbar, St. Teresa of the child Jesus Christ, and that's a Catholic. Okay, on the right, this came up just a few weeks ago when the war started. I felt that we needed to, and these are the things that I organized because I'm less busy than the other folks, really. I seem to have they're really busy with their parishes, with their churches, with whatever they're doing, and so now we can just kind of scroll and up to the next level, Madalena. Okay, so the class that we have, and we like to put, one of the classes that we're doing now is actually a group that was formed, as you see in May of 2022, and we took 11 months studying the Acts of Apostles together. This group has stayed together, and many of them participated, and some of you did as well, in the Talmud class that I gave over the summer in that same time slot. And then we moved in beginning of October, to what's called Second Isaiah. And this is the same group. I teach this together with Reverend Dr. Stephen Kinney in Austin. So half the group are about half the group are from Texas, and we have a Baha'i leader in that group. We could text down. We did an interfaith peace service at the beginning, towards the beginning of the war with Ukraine as well. Could you text? Go down. Okay. One of the things I'm going to talk about today is From Holiness to Hatred. I brought an example from that, so we'll leave off with that right now. Again, great graphics. Sometimes original, sometimes taken. One on the left was a direct reaction to the George Floyd tragedy and everything that was happening at the moment. And that was an online, during the pandemic, it was an online, we spent, I don't know, 8 months, 9 months, I forgot how often, but I think every other week, on different texts from the Jewish tradition and how they influence our thinking on Black Lives Matter. I'm not talking about the organization, I'm talking about the value that Black Lives Matter, the saying. And what I was doing, what I would do, the format was text, and I interviewed somebody from, mostly from the African American community here in Palm Springs or other places as well. And we tried to cover different topics like microaggressions, like reparations, real estate issues, medical care, all kinds of different things. And they brought experts each time. We can scroll down. In earnest, when I began the New Testament study, that was on the left. That was with Rev Kev. We did the Gospel according to Matthew, and we did that once a week. That took us about 10 months, I think. First in person, then in the pandemic online. Another example is with Pastor Jane of the Methodist Church. We had a reading group of Jews and Christians together, reading Abraham Joshua Heschel's The Sabbath. Before that, with Rev Kev, we did From Aging to Saging, which is a book by Reb Zalman, Shachter Shlomi, about what the title says. And right in the beginning of Or Hamidbar, it was, was that in the beginning? No, that was a year later. We did the interfaith, and then we've had other things over the years as well. Some of them have worked out, some of them have not. The White Fragility book study never came into being. The pandemic started right then. The youth mentoring effort, things that we were going to do, that we were set up to do with other communities, they're in the back. They're there. We can go back. We can take away the screen now. Thanks. One of the things that I have planned, but I applied for funding, did not get, and I have to kind of justify the amount of time I spent on different things, is Native American injustice from a Jewish perspective, something I really want to do. I spent a lot of time studying, reading on my own in the pandemic, educating myself really from zero, because I went to a Orthodox high school. How much was that covered in high school in the 70s, anyway, in the early 70s? And then I left in 75. I left this country and really had no exposure to that kind of stuff. So I've been and it's something I'd like to do. And thankfully, and I include this in interfaith dialogue, because Native American culture it's not just, as is Black Lives Matter, it's not just, the lines are blurred between religion and sociology and justice, and there is religion in the background of all these things, certainly from our point of view. And so just this Friday, there was the opening of the Agua Caliente band of Cahuilla Indians here in Palm Springs. Their cultural center, their museum and cultural center, which has been, the building's been built for years now, it seems like, but it's finally open. I didn't get to see the inside yet, but I was at the opening ceremonies, and I look forward to doing some work with them as well, and sharing in that faith tradition, which is challenging because it's from another world, and there's not really sacred text. They're sacred oral traditions. There's bird song. There's things that I want to be open to, and that's looking forward. Okay, so comments or questions before we actually take a look at some of the text on the sheet. Okay, I don't know if anybody. Okay, just speak up if you want to say something. Okay. All right, then let's get to the first program that I did in Palm Springs when I was still at Temple Isaiah. It was in person, and then during the pandemic, or even before, it became a podcast. I had aspirations for a podcast, and we did a number of podcasts, and you can still find them online, I believe. I didn't bring the link here. I'm sure, I would imagine they live someplace online. I love doing them. And I did some of them myself, but most of them I did them in tandem with somebody else. But then at some point I realized nobody was listening to them. So why go through the whole production? And we did quite a few over the years, and both in person and in podcasts. And I came up with the I will admit, I will brag, the clever name Psalm Springs. And so the example is from the beginning of that, back in 2016 or 2017 at Temple Isaiah. One of the Episcopal priests who was out here, and then he moved on to the Midwest, is Lane Hensley, still a friend. I still check in with him, and also had a strong background in Bible studies beforehand. And we did this in-person dialogue about Psalm 8. So maybe we'll ask, would somebody like to read from the, let's read from the Altar's translation on the right-hand side, and then I'll kind of point out maybe just a few things, how it's different in what Lane brought. And this is what you have here is actually the text sheet from that day, that evening that we did together. Somebody like to read from the Book of Psalms, right-hand side of the table? Rita Claire, go ahead.
The Book of Common Prayer, 1970.
No, let's read the right-hand column.
Oh, the right hand, sorry. The Book of Psalms, for the lead player on the Githits of David's Psalm. Lord, our Master, how majestic your name in all the earth, whose splendor was told over the heavens. From the mouth of babes and sucklings, you found its strength on account of your loss to put an end to enemy and avenger. When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, you fixed firm. What is man that you should note him, and the human creature that you pay him heed? And you make him even less than the gods, with glory and grandeur. You crown him, you make him rule over the work of your hands. All things you set under his feet, sheep and oxen all together, and also the beasts of the field, birds of the heavens and fish of the sea, what moves on the paths of the seas. Lord, our Master, how majestic your name in all the earth.
Okay. Is this a psalm that people know? Do you recognize? Maybe you recognize the Hebrew more, but does anybody feel any of this is maybe not the whole psalm, but certain ideas, right? Right, from the mouth of babes, right? Remember, this is Altar's translation, so it's a new, very, very recent translation. And I used it in this context because I wanted to give a counter to what Lane what Father Lane brought here, and I'll talk about some of the things. But first of all, I think it's an appropriate psalm for these days, right? From the mouths of the children, sucklings. You know, the prayers coming out from those children, and kind of on one hand, the suffering in front of us, but on the other hand, the greatness of the creation and God's expression of God's self, the way that we see it, if we're looking in that direction. Any comments or questions about this text before we compare it to the one next to it? Hey, not getting much participation today. Okay, so let's look on the left-hand side. Just kind of going down yourselves. What are the things that you see are different? This is it's not from a Bible, it's from the Book of Common Prayer, which is their Siddur, their prayer book of the Anglican Church, the Episcopal Church's prayer book. What's different? I see you talking, Sandra, but we need you to unmute first.
They talk about angels. We don't talk
Right.
about angels.
Well, we is Robert Alter, right? Right. So what's in Robert Alter's translation? Can you see the parallel?
I gotta go back to it now. Let's see. He says, you have made him but little lower than the angels. And here it says, you have made him little less than the gods, right, with glory and grandeur. So, yeah. So that's the only word. That's almost the only word that's different.
Well, so let's just talk about that a second. Well, angels we kind of understand, right? You made it a little bit less than, but gods, since when does God have other little g gods around, right? And of course, many of you know that there are different little flags in the old biblical text, whether it's the chapter 1 of Genesis, where God says, "Let us make humanity," in the first person plural, or whether it's Psalm 29 that some of you know from synagogue, Havul Adonai b'nei Elim, Havul Adonai kavod, Havul Adonai b'nei Elim. Give to God, O you sons of God, you children of God. And it's not talking about people there. It's talking about this group, the first chapter of Job, the Greek translation, and which is also reflected in the Dead Sea Scrolls of one of the poems at the end of Deuteronomy that talks about the nations of the world according to the corresponding sons of God above. The whole story of the sons of God that come down and have sex with the daughters of men in Genesis. These things come up from time to time, not a lot, but they come up. And so Alter, being not only a scholar of literature, but a Bible scholar, sees that this is one of those things here. But from a theological point of view, and you would find angels in other Jewish translations as well, probably. I didn't check, but my guess would be the same. But from a theological point of view, in a prayer book, in church, you're not really interested in mentioning little g gods, right? And so that was one thing we brought up there, is that here, this is something familiar to the churchgoers from their prayer book, and it is in the Jewish liturgy, but not nearly as much, right? It's not a regular different. There's different times when we might use it during a year, but so that's one difference here. Another difference, how about in the beginning?
I saw one in the beginning. Now I lost it. Wait. This is our Lord, our governor.
Well, look. Well, how does the psalm begin? What's in verse 1 in the traditional Jewish text?
Calls it a David psalm.
Right. For the lead player on the Gittit and a psalm of David's psalm. So it's like 3 titles mashed to one. And you know, the titles are a little bit strange in the book of Psalms. We almost always say they were given afterwards to the psalm by somebody who edited the book of Psalms, and that's assuming that it wasn't King David, the way that the Talmud assumes. But first of all, nobody knows what a Gittit is, and we're going to see that in a second. What does a Gittit mean? And we're going to see. Yeah, okay, we'll leave that for now. But that's taken out of, because that title, it gets in the way. When you're in prayer, it gets in the way. It's kind of like, you know, the Karl Bach melody, Mizmor LeDavid, Havul Adonai b'nei Elim. That's Psalm 29 from Kabbalat Shabbat. A song of David, give thanks to the Lord. It's a song of David. It should be full stop and then the poem, right? If you were really to take it seriously. Sometimes the title of a psalm doesn't make sense entirely. The psalm, I'm blanking on the number right now, the Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit, the Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit, which is in daily and Shabbat Shachari and Psukei Zimra, for those that are familiar. It's also the song of the day, the psalm of the day during Chanukah, because it says Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit. This is a song for the dedication of the temple. And then it goes on to be an extremely personal psalm. Maybe we did that here. I don't remember if we did that here or not. A very personal psalm about the ups and the downs of life. And while it was projected onto the story of the people of Israel by rabbis in Talmudic literature, Midrashic literature, it itself, so sometimes the title gets in the way. And so that's one thing. The other thing here is from the tradition, monastic tradition. You'll remember the Episcopal Church, or you should know if you don't. It's good to know if you don't remember, if you've never studied before, but the Episcopal Church is part of the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church, Church of England, is really part of the Roman Catholic Church, but broke away for political reasons and not necessarily for theological reasons. And while things have grown differently over the years, there's still a Latin tradition that is appreciated. And this is the little semblance of Latin. And so that was an opportunity for Father Lane to talk about that to the Jews that were present. And Arita Claire, I don't know if you were there. You were probably there. I'm not sure you would remember, or Harold. But this was the first kind of deep exchange, certainly in my time in Temple Isaiah, of Jews and Christians together. Let's learn about each other's liturgy. Let's learn about each other's theology, the limitations of academic study. That would be in the angels and the gods thing. And so, by the way, Dominus Noster means, O Lord, our governor, or O Lord, our Lord. It's just Lord and governor are kind of the same thing. So we did a reading of the thing. I'm sure there was other stuff that was said orally, but I just have I don't remember. This wasn't recorded. And so let's go down to the, if you would, Sandra, do you have the text? Do you want to read A1? So this is what I shared with the group there.
A1?
Yeah.
Babylonian Talmud, Brachot 34b. So R, is it Hayat? B, Abba, also said in the name of our Yohanan.
So R is abbreviation for rabbi.
Okay, all right.
Rabbi, and B is Ben, son of. Sorry.
That's okay. No, I don't know how to pronounce them. Thank you. A man should not pray except in a room which has windows, as it is said. Now his windows were open in the upper chambers toward Jerusalem. That's interesting.
What hit me with this was, let's say in verse, first of all, how majestic your name in all the earth, right? Your splendor was told over the heavens in verse 4. When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, you fix them. So you'll see in a second how where my mind was going with this. I love this passage. I love the passage because of my first synagogue that I was the rabbi, actually after I was ordained, was Yar Ramot, the Ramot forest in the northern part of Jerusalem. And the building was built when I got there. There was no electricity yet, there was no plumbing, but the building was built and had this huge arc of windows looking up towards Jerusalem from the north, from up the hill. And it was beautiful. And I remember when I went in there right away, I remember this piece of Talmud, right? You should daven in a place where there's windows. And I think that this was probably the first study that I did with when I got there, or maybe when I auditioned there or something. And so, but where does the Talmud learn it from? A story of Daniel. Now, many of us, we studied Daniel together. If you remember, that was pandemic, right? That was a few years ago. And there's that scene where Daniel's in the upper chambers and he's looking out and he's praying. And from that, the rabbis learned a few things about davening. But here, if Daniel davened in front of the window, daven for those that are not, I don't know who's with us, but daven, I mean pray. If Daniel prayed before the windows, you too pray before the windows. And then, well, why? What do we need the windows for? So go ahead, read the next from Rashi's explanation, Sandra.
Okay. Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, Rashi, windows. is that one's heart is humbled and prayer intention is improved by looking out up into the heavens.
So how you want to fill yourself with a feeling? Look to the heavens. Look to the heavens. I'm reminded of our one of our daughters who's now a rabbi in Jerusalem, and her uncle, Sasha's brother, had died when he was young. And we were in a plane on our way from Israel to Holland, or from Holland to LA. So this would have been the late 80s to work, visiting grandparents, whatever. And she's looking out and she's fixed on what's going on outside. And one of us, I don't remember if it was Sasha or me, we asked her, so what are you looking at? I'm looking for Ellie. Which is, I would imagine, is a common sentiment. I would imagine it happens with kids. They understand they're going up into heaven, but there's something. Look, who of us are not? We're actually, the stories of whenever we get this glimpse, where the astronauts looking down at Earth, or we're looking down when you fly over the Grand Canyon, or when you get up. There's something about it. When we're on a mountaintop, we can see that whole contrast of the sky. There's something very in all of us. It's a human condition, and Rashi, nails it with that particular comment. Now, I will say, so then Lena brought this text from St. Augustine, which is a challenging a literary source for us to use. He was not a lover of Jews by any way. He had lost some of the most difficult stuff in interfaith dialogue comes from this particular church father who lived in North Africa in the 3rd century, if I remember correctly. Harold, would you read this section from St. Augustine? Don't get stuck too much, because in the style, this is not my translation, of course, but this is the old way of translating things in a literary way, which doesn't flow. Go ahead, Harold.
He seems to say nothing of wine presses in the text of the psalm, of which this is the title.
Before we go on, why would he even talk about wine presses? Because when it says Mizmor Lamanatseach al Hagitit, a gat is a wine press. Gitit, we don't know what it is, so he just assumed somebody must have translated that he was working that it's on the wine press, because gitit is like a little wine press. Go ahead.
By which it appears that one and the same thing is often signified in Scripture by many and various similitudes. We may then take wine presses to be churches, on the same principle by which we understand also by a threshing floor the church. For whether in the threshing floor or in the winepress, there is nothing else done but the clearing the produce of its covering, which is necessary both for its first growth and increase and arrival at the maturity either of the harvest or the vintage. Of these coverings or supporters then, that is, of chaff on the threshing floor, the grain, and of husks in the presses, the wine is stripped, as in the churches, from the multitude of worldly men which is collected together with the good, for whose birth and adapting to the divine word that multitude was necessary, this is effected, that by spiritual love they be separated through the operation of God's ministers.
This is a pretty difficult passage, right? The church is a filter through which humanity goes through, and only the good guys, only the wine is left, and only the grain is left. Did he mean here, did he really mean Jews and synagogue? I don't know. It seems here more he's talking about in general. Remember, there's a lot of non-Christians out there as well, pagans, and that's in the background of our next text that we're going to look at. But this is a difficult, and one of the points was of this dialogue was to both of us to recognize the difficult passages. That already, look, I've been doing this long enough. In the beginning, you steer clear of those things. Why go there? Why? I remember people saying, but isn't it hard to talk about Christians? In the aughts, people were saying, isn't it hard? But what about the fact that they blame us for Christ's death? What about what? And I used to say, that's not what we do. Why go there in the beginning? Why go to the most difficult places? Let's first create a bond, a common bond of love, if you will, of brotherhood, of sisterhood, of camaraderie, and then we can get to the difficult ones. Well, with many of these guys already, and with Lane, we're at the stage we can do some of the difficult stuff, and I'll show you an example in just a second, which is which happened 6 years after this. After this came the next example. This is one of the early examples, and so we talked a little bit about that and how and Lane, you know, as does Rev Dan today in the class that we give together in person. Harold, you'll know, you're there. Rita Claire, he distances himself from St. Augustine in many ways, and that's something that progressive Christians can do. I don't have this kind of dialogue with the Roman Catholic priest in town. I would like to, but he said to me one point, he was his first post was in Papua New Guinea. I'm pronouncing it bad. You know,
Papua New Guinea.
right, and he was there for many years, and he went in a little boat from place to place and giving communion to the people that lived out there, and so he sees himself very much as a people person. Prayer, does a lot of funerals. It's a big church, a lot of funerals, a lot of weddings, and he has the capacity for outreach to the LGBTQ community. So I've asked him twice. He says, I'm not the guy for that. You got to find somebody else. And then he sent me to one of the brothers in the same order that he belongs to, and they never got back to me. They don't know what to do with me. They don't know me. They don't know what to do with me. So I always this is one of the morals of the story today. I find I keep it tight in Palm Springs. I'll go out and do stuff whenever I'm welcome. I will try, but if I want to really do serious stuff that we're talking about, I've got to have this, it's got to be limited for me. I'm just speaking for me right now. It's got to be limited, and there has to be bond of trust, of friendship. The group of clergy, Lane was part of it, and the others there's about 7 or 8 of us that get together every month, almost every month, to share a meal, lunch, for dinner, once at a wine bar. They're all, we celebrate birthdays together. It's not anything official. It's not the interfaith chapter, the interfaith of Palm Springs. There is an organization like that is of the whole Coachella Valley. I went to a few things in the beginning when I got here, and I saw, for me, it wasn't serious. It's just not, they're talking about different kinds of things. They want to have a Martin Luther King service, which takes forever to plan, takes forever to have. It went on for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I just find, I try to keep it simple, and what I hope I at least find meaningful. So we were able to dialogue in front of the 2 congregations that met, Father Lane and I, about the challenges of these kinds of words. So that's one example. I also brought here, but I didn't bring it in the text, is Rabbi Cook, who was the first chief rabbi of Palestine. You probably know, you've heard the name before the state of Israel, under the British mandate. And Rav Cook has a beautiful, beautiful interpretation here of the Talmud and Rashi. He disagrees with Rashi. He says you need the windows in a synagogue or wherever you're praying. You need the windows to be able to look out onto the world and to see the good things and to see the bad things and to be connection with the world around you. And to me, that's just yeah. So whether it's looking out at nature, or whether it's looking out on downtown of some city where it's difficult to look out, or whether it's making sure that you look, as I do, at least once a day, I spend some part of the day looking at the scenes from Gaza and the bombings from Gaza, the same way that I look and continue to look on Israeli TV at the stories of those that were massacred, those that were butchered, those that were saved, those that were parents that have lost their children and lost children in wars beforehand. The same way, I force myself, even if I'm not in a good mood, to see that window onto the world, and hopefully that includes my prayer. Rita Claire.
It brought up something that happened a long time ago. I was raised in New York, got my education in the New York school system. They decided that it was a distraction to have windows in the classrooms. The children were looking out and not paying attention. So they started building classrooms without windows, and then they discovered that was not working. Children learn better if they're freer to be able to explore and look out.
Good point.
I thought that was really I had forgotten about that.
Okay. So now we'll go on to the second half. This is the last part of the presentation. This is fast forwarding, not from the last years I showed you on this, and we're just coming off of last Friday night, this wonderful experience. But now I would like to show a video, which this is the warning that you get beforehand, like on CNN or I want to warn you, there are some very uncomfortable, ugly words that are said in this. It's nothing violent, and it's nothing, but it's difficult to hear. If I know you're supposed to say if you're triggered by this, whatever. I don't think you will. I want to say this is from a man who leads some certain Christian, perhaps Baptist, I don't remember what is, in a place called Tempe, I think, in Arizona. And he's very much alive, although many of the videos have been taken down. The ones that are on YouTube, for when I first started this program. So this particular project was designed towards the end of the pandemic with Father Andrew Green, who is my dear friend. He's now retired. And we still get together on a regular basis for coffee. And Andrew and I, Andrew had an Episcopal priest, had a very good training. He was in Palm Springs, and he knew, of all the folks out here, he knew the most about interfaith dialogue because he had been in his church, his parish for decades. And he had been in touch with the rabbi who was not the first rabbi, but yeah, really the first rabbi, great rabbi of Temple Isaiah, who passed away during the pandemic. His name will come to me in a second, but we used to talk often on the phone, and so he knew about it, and so he was the first. He actually reached out to me in the first weeks that I was here, and he came to pray Kabbalat Shabbat, and I came to his church. I was in his church a lot. Okay, so this was a program called From Holiness to Hatred and Back Again. We'll talk about that title in a second together, which I did with Father Andrew Green right after his retirement. This was the project that we were doing together. And for this, we received funding from the local Jewish Federation, I will say, with thanks and with credit to them. So let's go ahead and see this video of this horrible man in Arizona. Okay, on our end, it's stuck, Madalena.
Is one outwardly, the Bible told us. Neither
No,
is that
gotta go back
circumcision which
to
is
the
outward in
beginning,
the flesh.
please.
But he is a Jew which is one inwardly.
If you can make it larger, please. All right. This is not going well. All right. Sorry, Madalena, I don't know if it's on your end, if you're stuck.
No, I'll try again.
Okay. This is worth it, folks. It's worth it to see. So while you're trying, I will say that this is nothing that I see in Palm Springs. I just don't see it around me. I can't believe it's happening close by and I wouldn't know about it. It might be happening in other parts of the Coachella Valley. I kind of doubt it. Is it happening in Southern California? Yes, but...
Did you know most women who get breast cancer have no family history? But then how do you know if you're at risk? Get a...
Just leave it like this. We'll just let it go.
Hello, this is Pastor Stephen Anderson from Faith Forward Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. Today I want to talk about Revelation 2:9. In the last video, we showed in Romans 2:28 and 29 that he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, the Bible told us. Neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew, which is one inwardly. Keep that in mind as we read Revelation 2:9. The Bible reads, I know thy works, and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Now in Romans 2:28, he said he's not a Jew, which is one outwardly. That means that when God looks today at the people that call themselves Jews, he said if they don't believe in Jesus Christ, Philippians 3:3, then they're not circumcised in the heart. They're not a Jew of the heart. They're a Jew outwardly, but God does not regard them as such. So that's why in Revelation chapter 2, verse 9, he talks about people who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. So when the Jews today say, we're Jews, God says they're lying, because he says he's not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh, but he's a Jew, which is one inwardly. Now, there have been a lot of people over the years who've talked about who the synagogue of Satan represents, as if there's any question about it, as if there's any mystery about it. There's only one religion in the world that uses synagogues. That would be Judaism. So when God talks about the synagogue of Satan, that's clearly who he's talking about. By the way, they're the only people who go around saying, we're Jews, when really God says they're not, because they don't believe in Christ. So it's a pretty clear fit, especially when you get the context of the next verse. Because right after he says they say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, he says in verse 10, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I'll give thee a crown of life. Why would God go directly from talking about the blasphemy of the synagogue of Satan straight into a verse about Christians being persecuted? That's because if you read the book of Acts, the Jews are always the ones persecuting the Christians. In fact, as you read the entire book of Acts, you'll never find the Romans persecuting the Christians one time in that book. But over and over again, it is always the Jews who persecute the Christians in almost every single chapter. That's why he associates the synagogue of Satan, those who say they are Jews and are not, with persecution of believers, because they were the ones who were doing it at that time. There's no doubt about it. Judaism today is the synagogue of Satan.
Thanks, Madalena. Yeah, difficult stuff. In the recent years, it is out there. Before we talk a little bit more about that, let's look at the actual passage. Megan, would you read B1 from Revelation? There's a typo, which should be 2:8 to 11.
Revelation 2:8. To the angel of the church of Smyrna, write, these are the words of the first and the last, who is dead and came to life. I know your affliction and your poverty, even though you are rich. I know the slander on the part of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Beware, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison so that you may be tested. For 10 days you will have affliction. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Let anyone who has an ear to listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Whoever conquers will not be harmed by the second death.
Okay, so it ostensibly looks pretty bad, and it doesn't feel, especially in the eyes of this pastor, but just to let you know that it's not just some crazy anti-Semitic, absolutely anti-Semitic, and homophobic, absolutely homophobic, because many of his other videos are these tirades against, and any number of things that most of us, or all of us stand against. Even at the toppest levels, toppest echelons of American power at some point in the mid-20th century. Megan, if you'd read this also from the account of the Nixon tapes, phone call with Billy Graham.
With Billy Graham. New Nixon tapes include phone call with Billy Graham. Startling, too, is the information that continues to come out about the Reverend Billy Graham's anti-Semitism, showing how he raised the subject of Jews with Nixon and commiserated with him about the synagogue of Satan and the Jews who promote pornography and obscenity. He added in a statement, while never expressing these views in public, Reverend Graham unabashedly held forth with the president an age-old classical anti-Semitic canards.
You have two links here. One is to Stephen Anderson, the other one equally offensive. Now, please don't get me wrong, folks. I do not feel that I am drowning in a sea of anti-Semitism. I can't be clear about that. I don't feel that way. I know that some people do, and that is their reality. And I want to address that reality and want to give people hope. But I also understand that on the other side, there are those that have these tendencies because perhaps they grew up with them. I don't know his background, but many of you, some of you have been exposed over the years to this kind of thinking. Part of studying together, not all of it, but part of studying together, praying together, and fixing the world together is fighting this horrible hatred. If I have somebody who is in a group that I'm speaking with, that we're with Father Andrew, whoever it might be, who grew up on this idea of, well, their synagogues say, well, even if synagogues are different now, they were then. Well, I would like to let's talk it out. Let's learn. Let's embrace. Let's not ignore it. Let's not cut it out of the text. Let's recognize it and deal with it. And my way of dealing is Torah, right? Is teaching, and then also praying together. So that's kind of what you have here. We're kind of at. I'm gonna go through just a few things from the pieces that, and then I'll get some reactions. I will leave time at the end for reactions, but I'm gonna move ahead right now. What we wanted to do, Father Andrew and myself, was to recognize a text that is sacred. It's part of the New Testament. It's part of the canon. As difficult as Revelation might be, that's a whole other issue. But there are other. We did a whole series. There's plenty of texts in the New Testament which are difficult for us as Jews to read today. But to recognize that they are sacred in the church and sacred for many people, but also to recognize the hatred that those texts have bred, or have created, or have fostered, or have supported, or have whatever. It's not always from the text. Sometimes people are anti-Semitic for different reasons, and then they use that text as a basis, as a proof text. Sometimes people are totally naive, they have no idea, and they see this. Oh, you're a Jew synagogue? You must be a synagogue. You rabbi, you have a synagogue? So there's different reasons. We want to recognize the hatred that is from holiness to hatred, but we want to come back again from it. We don't want to leave it at that. It's not an academic study of theory. Look how it was and look how it is. No. We want to possess. And that means that I, as a Jew, I feel, I'm just speaking for myself now, recognize there is some sacred value to another person's holy text. Sacred value. So, and I would want the ones that love me, my friends, to feel the same way, that if they don't feel that way about the synagogue and the Jews, then what can they do? How can they understand and interpret the text today? Yes, we are often talking about midrash, right? Not the direct, literal understanding.
Hurting me.
But embellished. But so what we have here are a few examples. Not going to go through them. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, there is often this idea, this lashing out. Those are Jews, right? Living in the time of the first century, lashing out at other Jews by also saying sons of Satan, right? So first of all, Jews said about Jews, sons of Satan. And then you could say, well, but that's only the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were crazy people. They were living out there. There was a small sect. Well, how about the Babylonian Talmud? Given not witnessed from the time of when Revelation was written, but from a little bit later. And that's what we have in the Babylonian Talmud, Yevamot. Harold, do you want to read this for us? B5?
Okay. B5, okay. In the time of Rabbi Dosa ben Harkinas, 1st and 2nd century CE, the sages permitted the rival wife of a daughter to the brothers. He said to them, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel.
Okay, so you're asking yourself, what did I just read? I have no idea what I just read. That has to do with the Hilchot Yevamot. The Yevamah, the Yibum, is when the brother of a deceased man who is married, who has no children, has to take upon himself that widow as his wife. Now, there are questions of incest involved, right? What if there's, what if you're married to his sister, to that woman's sister? There's all sorts of issues. Yevamot is a thick tractate. It's for me, it was one of the most difficult Talmudic tractates to ever study. We devoted a year to it, at least in the yeshiva. And this is one of the tradition. The law doesn't matter to me right now, but there's a difference between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. the two schools of thought of the first century of the Common Era in what the halacha goes through. And that's important because they still had their, even though they disagreed on those laws, which means that there were mamzerim, there were those that were that could have been born of illicit unions, they still had their children marry each other. That's for another day. But now comes the important part. So they heard. This was the background. Go ahead. They said, his students said to him.
Okay. They said to him, but didn't they say in your name that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai? He said to them, did you hear that Dosa ben Harkinas issued this ruling, or did you hear that it was stated by Ben Harkinas?
Right. Did you hear my first name and my last name, Ben Harkinas, son of Harkinas, or did you only hear son of Harkinas? Go ahead.
They said to him, on your life, Rabbi, we heard simply Ben Harkinas. He said to them, if so, it is no wonder, as I have a younger brother who is the firstborn of the Satan, and his name is Yonatan, and he is among the disciples of Shammai. It is he who issued this ruling.
Not what you would expect from the mouth of a rabbi. Well, maybe I wouldn't talk about my brother that way, but it's kind of like saying he's a son of a son of a gun, right? He's a son of a gun. Whoever came up with the son of a gun, what does that even mean? But it's or in Hebrew he's or Yiddish is a mamzer. A mamzer. Mamzer literally means bastard, but a mamzer is not a nice person, not a good person, tricky person. He's calling his own brother firstborn of Satan. Now, I said a later source because this is recorded in the Babylonian Talmud. But given the oral tradition is from reports to be around the same time, what do we learn from this? And this is what I brought, and Father Andrew at the time brought his own text orally at the time from Greco-Roman culture, the rhetoric of calling your opponent. Look at often I will say something that people say, you can't talk that way, Rabbi, but you know what, I in some ways my English was frozen as a teenager, and then I went to Israel, so sometimes I talk like a teenager, which or when I was watching The Sopranos, I began to talk like Tony Soprano, or Games of Thrones. I'm influenced by that. I'm not good at that rabbinic kind of persona that you're supposed to have, but people talk that way. And in this case, there was enmity between the house of Shammai and the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel, even if it was brothers. And so, if that is in the context, if the Roman rhetoric is in the background, then maybe it's not so horrible what the Book of Revelation does with synagogue of Satan. And so that's kind of putting it into context. And then we'll in B6 we'll take the next step, which is bringing it back again, back to holiness. And sorry I'm going late, but if you can work with me on this one. So Susan, do you want to read today?
Yes.
So now we're at, how do we get back again from that hatred, even with the context, contextualizing it with maybe that's just a rhetorical ploy. Go ahead.
One day the divine beings presented themselves before the Lord, and at the adversary.
Forget the A. The A is a mistake, a typo.
And the adversary came along with them. The Lord said to the adversary, perhaps Satan, where have you been? The adversary answered the Lord, I have been roaming all over the earth. The Lord said to the adversary, have you noticed my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil. The adversary answered the Lord, does Job not have good reason to fear God? Why, it is you who fenced him round, him and his household and all that he has. You have blessed his efforts so that his possessions spread out in the land. But lay your hand upon all that he has and he will surely blaspheme you to your face. The Lord replied to the adversary, see, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on him. The adversary departed from the presence of the Lord.
So to make it clear, and I need to redo this translation, is the adversary with a capital A in Hebrew is Satan, Satan. And that is this is the first appearance of Satan in Jewish literature, if you will, right? Not as an independent force of evil, but as a literary character, as the adversary, the devil's advocate, right? Literally, maybe this is where it comes from, the devil's advocate. Yeah, you think Job is good? Oh, God, really? Let's make him suffer a little bit. Let's see if he still is as pure in heart as you think, as God you think he is. And then God says, okay, but you just can't touch him. Of course, you could touch his wives, his children, his livestock, they all go. But don't worry, at the end of the story, and then there's the long book of Job, which is very theological, philosophical, and the first chapter and the ending chapter don't really have much to do with the middle part of the book. Many people would say it's a totally different author, it's an editor. And at the end, don't worry, he gets back a new wife and new children and new flocks. And we're meant to say, okay, so I guess there is justice in the world. Of course, what about the wives and the children? But that's not the point. The point here is that Father Andrew and I use this as a way, let's think of synagogues and churches today as of Satan, not the satanic popular culture, but let's think of them as adversarial. And those of you that know me, I'm a bit adversarial when it comes to normative Judaism, when it comes to American public, when it comes to opinions about Israel. I think it's good to be adversarial, to a certain degree, of course. But I think the adversariality is part of who a synagogue and who a church should be. You've got to challenge people. I was at a conference years ago about Jewish healing when it first came out, when we first began talking about these things. It was like 2000 maybe, or 2001 in Arizona, and they were reviewing the new section of poetry that was going to be in the new Reform Movement prayer book, and one of the poems was very challenging. And a woman said there, she says, I don't come to synagogue to be challenged. I come to synagogue for comfort. And I understand what she says, but I said, well, as a rabbi, I see my job as a synagogue being a place of comfort, but also of challenge. You got to know, the art is to know when and which things, right? So so that's kind of my take. And I want that with two examples that I wanted to show you from, like, different stages of what was going on in the last 8 years. I cannot be more thankful to my friends in the clergy here, who I love them. We have genuine love between us. We check in with each other, leading prayer together. And any of you who were there the other night, I think you'll feel that it seems to get better and better every year, more and more intense. And I Ashreinu Matov Chalkeinu, say with Sasha quite often, how lucky we are, how fortunate we are to be in this place, to get to do this work. Reactions or questions? Yes, Harold.
I've got just a comment and then just a technical question. The comment is with regard to this guy from Tempe, Arizona, and Billy Graham. If anybody created God in his own image, it's that guy. I think God, you can tell that God is created in your image when it turns out, coincidentally, that God hates exactly the same people you do.
Good point.
I think that's okay. Number one. Number two, I find it interesting in the passage about the Nixon tapes with Billy Graham. You cite, if the source is a guy named Eric Young writing in a magazine or publication called the Christian Post in 1973. So this expose of Billy Graham was to a Christian audience, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to go back. I didn't do the research, the homework on exactly what was who is Christian Post. Is that, who is that exactly? But yeah, that and I truth is I was looking for something from there, and that's what I found. I'm sure somewhere on the net you could find the actual transcripts.
Yeah.
Maybe not, but yeah.
But it was interesting to see that Billy Graham's anti-Semitism was being condemned in this Christian publication from 50 years ago.
He's being outed. Yeah.
That I thought was interesting.
Great. Anybody else?
I just want to say
Go ahead.
how much I watch it on Facebook Live, but your Kabbalat Shabbat, Pride Kabbalat Shabbat was wonderful. Just as you say, it was inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. And if anybody here wants to watch
Still
it,
there.
you can find it on the Or Hamidbar Facebook page, if I'm not mistaken. So again, thank you all for being part of this group, and for those that are watching us now on Facebook, and those who will see the recordings of this. I love getting together with Jewish Collaborative of Orange County. I love seeing our people here in Palm Springs who are exposed to folks here in Southern California or other places where you might be from. And Rabbi Marsh and I don't have, as far as I remember, we don't have plans yet for something new, but you know me, I pop up on your schedule every few months or so. It's hard to get rid of me. Okay. All right, everybody. May we continue to pray for peace and for an end to this horrible war, with as few deaths as possible of people who are innocent. And God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Wonderful series.
Bye.
Thank you, Xander.